Qatar live stream, outlook and opportunities before and after FIFA World Cup 2022. My name is Richard Banks. It's a cold and autumnal day here in the UK, as you can see from my floral display behind me. And so it's a good time to think about warmer climes and good opportunities in countries that are perhaps less fiscally challenged than the UK at the moment. Before we start and before I introduce our guests, I need to read a quick disclaimer. So this live stream is for information purposes only. We are not providing investment or transaction advice. All opinions are those of the presenter, guests, and audience, not of Euromoney Institutional Investor PLC, and all content is copyright Euromoney 2022. So if I can ask my other panelists to switch their cameras on and join back in again. I've got Mohammed saying the audio doesn't seem to be working. Panelists, can you hear me? Yeah, Akbar is nodding. We seem to be having a little technical issues this morning, for which I apologize. So we're just over 6 weeks away from the start of the FIFA World Cup in Doha. And in our pre-panel meeting, Victoria and I were discussing that we're emotionally preparing for England to have at best a semi-final exit on penalties probably against Germany. But we are very confident that Qatar is going to produce a unique and memorable tournament. That Qatar is the first Arab host of the World Cup is no small achievement. And we at Euromoney have been following over the years how the nation has adapted and overcome the many logistical challenges that it has faced. And we have watched as the stadiums have gone up and the preparations have gone underway. And it's been, I think, an illuminating and exciting time for us. But while the World Cup is, of course, our current focus, there is far more going on in Qatar that arguably will have a much greater impact on the nation, on the region, and on the world. Take, for example, the timely, some might say, prescient expansion of the North Field gas project, just at a time when global demand for LNG is forecast to grow massively and, we believe, sustainably. What does this mean for Qatar, for its businesses, for the allocation of capital on the global markets? Well, to answer these questions and more, I'm joined by some very smart, knowledgeable people from Qatar. Some of you, all of whom I hope that you know in our audience. Gosh, we've got nearly 200 people in here. That's amazing. Sorry, I've just looked at the numbers at the bottom. It's fantastic. So I'm going to ask them in turn to introduce themselves, not that they need much introduction. So Leonie, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, well, good morning and good afternoon. So Leonie Lethbridge, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Commercial Bank, which is one of the privately owned banks, very notable privately owned bank in Qatar. And I've been in Qatar actually for 5 years, so I bring a somewhat local perspective, but I also bring a regional and global perspective, having worked in many markets, principally across Asia previously.
And you're Australian or New Zealander? Australian.
Excuse me. See, which country?
It's such a minefield. It's like asking someone which part of Ireland they come from.
Exactly right. So when we might discuss who's going to win, I'm torn between Qatar and Australia, but we'll get to that point.
Thank you very much. Basil, same question to you. Who are you and what do you do? I think we might be able to guess what you do from at least one of the pictures behind you.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So my name is Basil Bachos. I am currently the Sales Director and acting Marketing Director for United Development Company. UDC it was established in 1999. It's a leading Qatari public shareholding company, actually. And our two flagship projects are the Pearl Island and Juwan Island. I have the maps here. We pulled them out in August, satellite. These are real actual images here. I'm born and raised in Qatar. I did my school outside, just my university. I spent 5 years outside. So I was fortunate enough to witness the development of this beautiful country and the infrastructure, and especially the islands and what we present here. So I'll be handling a lot of the real estate talk.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely come to that and probably go into more detail on that that picture in the background. So Akbar, last but by no means least, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Richard. My name's Akbar Khan. I head up the asset management business for a company called Al Rayyan Investment. We're a subsidiary of a local bank called Masraf Al Rayyan. Our investment focus is the stock markets of the Gulf countries. Obviously, Qatar is within that. And also we look at sukuk globally. Everything that we invest in is Sharia compliant because our bank is an Islamic bank. I've been in Qatar since 2009. And before that, I was in London for a little bit more than a decade. So I've been in the investment industry for about 25 years.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, 2009, I always think it seems like yesterday, but actually it's quite a long time ago. And certainly you must have experienced, as indeed all of you have, already some quite significant changes in Qatar. Is that fair to say, Akbar?
Yes, very, very significant. I mean, from the population has gone up about 60% since I arrived here. The size of Doha has probably doubled since I've been here. There's been dramatic transformations as the country has grown and grown up in the process of growing.
Excellent. And what I think is interesting, and we're going to come on to talk about this, is that you can sort of look at the development of Qatar in phases, and I think we are, there's been about three. We're at the end of one, which is the sort of pre-World Cup, and at the start of another one. And there is a very compelling narrative for how the country's developed, but it's done it very, very quickly. We think the other Gulf countries have developed quickly, but Qatar is, it stands out on its own for the speed at which things have been done. However, before we talk about that, this is an interactive session. There is a Q&A, so our beloved audience, all 249 of you that are there, which is it looks like it's going to be a record for one of our questions. I have got the question panel open in front of me, and please ask them as we go through. I will try as much as I can as the moderator to address the questions to the panelists as we're going through. Some people try and use the chat. I mean, you can. I might not see that, but if you put them in the questions, you can upvote them. You can ask whatever you like. It's an open session. We may not answer it, but you can certainly ask it. So anyway, let's start with the questions that I've been considering in front of me. And Leonie, I'll come to you to start with. I began my opening remarks talking about the World Cup. I touched on the energy markets. Looking at the Qatari economy today, so whatever it is, the 29th of September, how has the World Cup and the energy boom affected Qatar today? Is the economy growing fast? Is there a sense of excitement? Is there what's happening now?
Yeah, I mean, there is absolutely a sense of excitement. And that's, I think, partly the World Cup, a little bit by the North Field expansion. Qatar, of course, has got very long-term contracts. So in relation to the energy markets and, let's say, energy price boom, Qatar is probably, more of a long-run player. But in terms of the World Cup, it's a culmination of 12 years of activity since the bid was won in 2010. And in that time, there's been $200 billion spent on infrastructure, actually a bit more than 200 billion, of which maybe only 5 or 10% has been, let's say 5% has been built, dedicated to the stadia. So what that tells you is that there's been a very substantial investment in world-leading infrastructure. whether it's ports, whether it's the airport, whether it's the metro, whether it's road. Independent assessments would say that that infrastructure is really world class. So that, I think, has created actually huge benefits for the economy in terms of the ability to diversify, which has been very manifest. It's very obvious, but also in terms of underpinning long-term sustainable growth as well. And of course, then there's the immediate hype for this year, which is real and substantive in terms of the benefits across many, many sectors, whether it's financial services, which is obviously near and dear to my heart, but also real estate, also tourism. So I think, the multiplier effect across multiple sectors of the economy is very powerful. And I think the other point is that, there is a sense that this is not only the quality of the infrastructure is very high, but the quality of the execution overall is very high. So there's a sense that this World Cup has lifted many boats on that rising tide. And that's kind of the feeling that exists in the country. I'd be interested in the other panelists' views on it as well, of course.
We're absolutely going to get that, but I wanted to do a little sort of turn it slightly on its head and ask you that. I mean, would you say it was fair to say, given what you said about infrastructure investment and the amount that has gone into things that are not really specifically relevant to the World Cup, that yes, the World Cup is, it is a flagship. It is literally a flag. It's a saying Qatar is on the map, etc., etc., for a market of audience of people that may not necessarily know. But it's a thing that is happening in Qatar, not the only thing that is happening in Qatar. The World Cup is symptomatic of a nation that has grown in size, wealth, and maturity over the last 12 years since the bid was won. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I think it fits in the longer term context of the economic development of the country as well. So, within the whole context of that substantially hydrocarbon fueled development at the start, which is then diversified, but there is investment over the horizon, both in terms of the North Field expansion, but also in terms of other infrastructure that will continue to be built, and in terms of I would say, investment in human capital as well, other investments, so ongoing diversification, investments in, let's say, sustainable energy, renewable energy as well. So it's not like it's an end point. If anything, it's a midpoint or a start point even.
Excellent, thank you. There's a couple of questions. I just want to acknowledge them, Ala, and I don't know whether it's Iris or Iris, about industries that will boom after the World Cup. Neither of you worry, we are going to come to those. In fact, that is question number 4 on my list of topics. But I want to come to Basil next. In your opening remarks, Basil, you mentioned obviously real estate, which is your specific area of expertise. Picking up from Leonie's point, where is the real estate market now in Qatar? And by all means talk about where it might be afterwards. But you indicated that it had developed significantly. But I can remember when these projects, such as the Pearl, were beautiful pictures. But there was literally nothing there other than sea. So give us a little bit of a narrative and story about how that, what is the real estate market and how is it developed up to today?
Actually, it's a very good point. So as we all know, real estate is actually one of the safest investments, let's say, generally speaking, when people tend to make their investments. Qatar has a very, very strong local economy, as Leonie was mentioning, in regards to the expansion, in regards to the oil and gas, our core revenue as a country, and the reflection it has on the economy itself. And real estate, we in UDC, being one of the leading development companies, we are specialized in the premium properties. And we've seen that this has been extremely stable, irrespective of all the let's say, the challenges we had, whether it was the political challenge, or whether we're talking about the pandemic itself, or the current situation around us now, the real estate has proven to be very, very effective. Surprisingly, one of our best numbers has been 2020s and 2021 during those times. The effect of FIFA has been definitely direct on real estate. I can assure you that. For me, on a personal level, the way we do our business as a company is we develop properties. We tend to sell majority of them, or sell a selected property of them, and then we retain some. We retain some for recurring revenue as well, in order to keep our financials flowing, in order to ensure that our share price is in control along with the stock market. And that being said, we've seen that, or I can personally see, based on our numbers, we have reached an all-high occupancy rate this year. We are currently at 96% occupancy. I personally call it's the year of leasing. Sales has been going, in a very nice way, very smooth way, but we can see the big influx, or the big, it's the year of leasing. We've done our part into several factors. So what we've done is we've seen a lot of leasing based on the residential side. So the long-term leasing, people coming into the country, finding jobs. So we can see this from the houses and the apartments that are being rented. We have participated based on our social responsibility with the government housing. We've also allocated around 318 properties to the Supreme Committee and the government housing during the FIFA World Cup, which we believe they've recently stated it will cover a lot of the media personnel here on the island. We have the national football team staying at one of the hotels that are currently with us. And then we have allocated personally what we call the short-term leasing, also just to make sure that there are enough, premium properties for the fans, or the people that are coming during the FIFA World Cup, such as, private villas, semi-attached villas, apartments, all the way from studios to a 4-bedroom. So that has definitely had a direct impact on the real estate so far, based on what we see now.
And do you, there's a question, two questions. Anwar and Sanjay asked, they both say $1 million questions. I'd say they're probably $100 million questions, or even $1 billion questions. But if will the World Cup provide real estate in Qatar with a lasting impact? I can totally understand if you own real estate in Qatar this year, you've got people coming in, start of November, whenever it is. I know it doesn't start till the 19th. But the people be there, they're having a great time. But then come to December the 20th, the World Cup is finished, and they
definitely there is.
But how does it sort of last? How does that demand continue?
So,
a lot of the people
we have taken, as a company, what I believe in, we've taken our precautions in every way, and we've looked at every single scenario. What we call is the pre-World Cup, during, post-World Cup. As you are aware, there's the 2030 vision that was actually drafted in 2008, Richard, way before the World Cup. So what I believe has happened is that it has given us KPIs actually to finish things, within the 12 years since it was, since we were gonna host it, since 2010 actually. So the way we see real estate is currently, there have been several approaches by the government that supports the real estate sector, and by developers like ourselves. For example, there has been, the government has taken initiative to have a freehold. So there are into two categories. Currently, any nationality around the world is free to come in and own properties in 9 designated areas. This shows you, or this gives you, this was technically a game changer for us, because what it did for us, it showed us that we need to start being prepared to welcoming the people from outside internationally. So by doing so, we've seen a lot of movement internationally, people coming that are interested in real estate itself. We have Leonie's bank, a commercial bank that has recently launched, I'm sure she'll tell you more about it now, what we call the non-residency mortgage plan. So now any nationality without the need of being a local resident is eligible to apply for a mortgage loan. And that really, we had to step on our projects. We had to make sure we have not stopped during, any of the challenges we had, such as the pandemic. So we stepped on it, such as, I have the beautiful map here behind me. So what you see here is the Pearl Qatar, or the Pearl Island. It sits on 4 kilometers in size. This was all man-made. It's an urban mixed development. Currently, we have 54,000 people residing on the island itself. And then an adjacent to it is our newest island, which is called Jiwan Island. And Jiwan Island will have, it's a state of the art. It will have a nine-hole golf course, residential building, private villas, and then all the way to private islands. So what we have here is we have properties from studios all the way to private islands. We still have an extremely healthy returns, despite what, the challenges that are going around regionally or internationally. We see that the 2030 vision will kick in as soon as the FIFA is done. We're also hosting the, you're going to have the Formula One. So there's so many international events that are coming there. And what I would say is technically we are transforming from, as again, Leonie said, from an infrastructure development. We are hoping that this will definitely put Qatar on the global map, and it will become a tourist and a business hub.
Sure. There's a couple of questions, I think, which I'd like to just bring in here because it's very relevant. Ala, again, asking a question which says, and I paraphrase it, that, obviously rents are very high now. Do you see rents coming down and values coming down perhaps slightly after the World Cup?
So yes, so in terms of the rents, we have to divide them into two categories. If we're talking about the short-term rentals, then yes, the short-term rentals will be identified for, during there's a special occasion. You're expecting, as I understood, around 1 million or 1.2 million fans. So this will have an impact on the rent because the demand is more than the supply. As for the long-term rentals, we've seen that it's been extremely, going smoothly. Once the supply becomes, once the supply becomes over the demand, then what I see is, I don't see, that, people say after the World Cup, there's going to be huge drops, because I don't see that coming in full effect, because, there's always, the plan is already ready on what's going to happen next. What I can see more is the competitive edge. We as a developer, what do we do? For example, is there a need to furnish the properties? Is there a need to give, throw in a small incentive, whether it's a free month or whether, so the demand is always there. There is always a demand because Qatar is a very strong economy. There's always people coming in, jobs are always open here. So what I see is, it's really on the competitive edge. So instead of me meeting 10 people to rent out, 7 units, I need to meet 30 people to rent out the 7 units. But the demand is always there. So I see it going in a very healthy manner, and not the drop which people are assuming it will do.
Yeah, I mean, that makes logical. Obviously, in the leasing market makes a lot of sense, but the longer term, it shouldn't have it. So Akbar, you've been very patient and you've been nodding, and I thought you got upset and switched your camera off and wouldn't talk to us, but I see you're back again. Again, same broad question to you before we move on to the legacy. You as you say, you look at the local capital markets, the Sukuk equity markets, and other asset classes. Have we seen a similar boost to those markets in terms of either valuations or liquidity? As a result of what is happening both in Qatar in terms of the World Cup, but also as a relative value play compared to what is happening in markets in Europe and the US, which have performed, as you no doubt know, as we all do, rather poorly this year.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So at the start of this year, when the Brent price was in the $90 area, we were expecting the equity markets, if I can talk about that specifically, to have a good year. We thought 2022 would be good. They've actually ended up much better than we had expected, and that's courtesy of what's been going on in Europe, the energy shock, the sanctions that the Europeans put on Russian oil, etc. So as a result, I think possibly well before the world decided to look at Qatar in November and December for football, I think the world turned to look at Qatar in March far more closely, particularly if you were in Europe and were wondering where your gas was going to come from. So Qatar is the largest exporter of LNG in the world. And as a result of the surge in energy prices, the region and Qatar along with it saw a big boost. So year to date, European and US stock markets are down about 20-25%, call it around 20%. Year to date, Qatar stock markets been strongly positive, as has some of the other countries in the Gulf as well. So, you know, the world is really struggling from issues to do with food price inflation globally and energy price inflation. And the greater the energy price inflation struggle, the greater the benefit for countries like Qatar. So from a fiscal point of view, the country is generating massive surpluses on a monthly basis in the region of $10 billion. And this is helping to pay for a lot of the bills that have been spent on this world-class infrastructure that Leonie was talking about. Incidentally, on our forecasts, actually the infrastructure spend bill over the last decade, we think has been more than $350 billion, but maybe we're just, that's what's 150 billion between friends.
Surely if we were politicians, we would say one doesn't spend on infrastructure, one invests in infrastructure.
Exactly. So as a result of what's been happening so far this year, completely unrelated to Qatar, the obviously energy prices have got higher, the government surpluses have obviously increased, and the stock market has done well, and that's been translated into other asset classes, whether it's fixed income, whether it's real estate, etc. So that's where we've reached so far.
Yeah, the Qatari rial is like many currencies, not all in the GCC, is pegged to the dollar. Dollar's been incredibly strong, but I think one of the interesting factors is the inflation rate. So what is the inflation rate in Qatar today, more or less? I mean, approximately.
So it's in the mid to high single digits if you look at it's in the mid single digits if you look at the official numbers. Yeah. I think always official inflation numbers ever in the world seem to be understated. Everyone can say, oh, well, so-and-so price is up 10, 20, 30, 40%. The interesting area where we have not had any inflation is in the price of fuel at the pump when we go to fill our cars. And that's really the benefit of being in a country which is able to, frankly, subsidize that and protect the population from the increase. Not all the countries in the region in the Gulf have chosen to do so, but Qatar certainly has. So without that, the inflation would certainly be higher, as viewers who aren't in the Gulf will unfortunately be experiencing.
But I mean, I think it's true to say, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're seeing strong growth, partly as a result of the work that has been done developing the economy in the past 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, partly as a result of fortuitous international events, fortuitous for Qatar, not fortuitous for other people. But also at the same time, you were seeing, relatively speaking, low inflation rates when compared to global averages, and particularly global averages in developed economies. Is that true? Leonie's nodding her head, so clearly I'm on something here.
Sorry, was that question for me, Richard?
Well, yeah, if you want. And then Leonie seems to very much agree, so I think she should say something as well. So Akbar, answer it, and then we'll go to Leonie.
Look, in a world where governments, central banks are scratching their heads and struggling to cope with the supply side shocks that came from the legacy of COVID, which have led to massive inflation across a vast number of, well, pretty much everything, because of a shortage, because of supply chain led shortages, logistics shortages, human capital shortages. Inflation is something that everyone is very well aware of, and policymakers have to figure out how to deal with this. In that context, where you are, if you do not have the dollar as your currency, your issues with the rising cost of importing food and energy are further exacerbated because your currency is depreciating, so it's now costing you even more. It's really messy, it's really unpleasant, and the world is in for a pretty rocky period. Within this, the Qatar is a relatively boring and calm. We have pluses and surpluses, and yes, there are challenges with food inflation, But that's probably one of the few areas, and not just food, but generally goods that are imported. But this is relatively modest compared to the benefits that the sovereign enjoys, given what its primary source of income is.
So thank you, Akbar. Leonie, I'd like to come to you first of all to respond to what Akbar said in the inflation question, but also perhaps look, and this is, I know, an area of specific expertise for you, but the World Cup is great. It's clearly going to be and has been and will be a boon for the country. But are there, how is the country managing the risks of doing that, and perhaps the risks in areas like logistics or cybersecurity, customer security, fraud? A lot of people are going to come to, almost 50% of the population of Qatar will, the same level of 50% of the population will come in the next 6 weeks, and that's a lot for a country. So inflation number one, security, cybersecurity, fraud number two.
Actually, I think there's some linkage between the two aspects, because to pick up on the point about supply chain-led inflation, one of the aspects about Qatar is that I think the economy is very well managed. And that was manifest also during the peak of COVID, when Qatar essentially kept open. So which was remarkable, and did not happen by accident. So it had a track and trace system that actually worked. Not to contrast adversely with others. So it had massive testing. It had very early rollout of the vaccine. Qatar Airways kept flying. So the supply chain, remarkably, the supply chain disruptions that other countries face were by and large not experienced here, although obviously there were some knock-on effects of lockdown in East Asian manufacturing. But I'd say it was very well managed. So yes, growth is actually quite strong and is projected to remain strong. In global terms, inflation is, I would say, Akbar said boring, I'd say smooth, but same sentiment.
I'll take either. Honestly, yes, take either.
Yes. So I think that, in that context, the challenges around logistics disruption, those kind of issues as it pertains to the World Cup, the massive investment, those kinds of disruption risks should be, I think, very minimal, notwithstanding the size of the event. In terms of other risks, I think the overarching theme is that the quality of execution in Qatar has actually been very high. And that will relate to aspects such as, let's say, identity theft is a global challenge, which has increased by digitization. Digitization has also increased rapidly here. But the investment on protecting people from those kinds of risks has been very widespread, very deep, and actually very innovative. So one of the things about putting Qatar on the map is, or cementing its place, consolidating its position on the map, has meant increased global attention, has meant, again, that rising tide lifting many boats, including in the security area. It's obviously a very safe country. Some people say, one of the 5 safest countries in the world in physical terms. And then those kind of more global challenges, as I said, there's been huge investment in driving the right kind of controls and protections, and even education of people around it. So I think it should actually be a well-managed event, and the risks, I think, are entirely manageable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it certainly seems from the news that we hear outside of Qatar that it's been taken tremendously seriously in terms of national commitment, and obviously I've been to Doha many times, so I think it'll be a different experience for the fans, but I think it ultimately it will be one that that runs very smoothly. So I want to move on now. I mean, we've done 36 minutes. We've got our numbers are still going up. 307 people. We've got more interesting as we've gone on. This is incredible. Basil, I want to come back to you, and I want to talk about the legacy. You know, the UK, London had the Olympics in 2012, and everyone would, you know, they just wouldn't shut up about legacy. So my question to you, as you know, as a business person, but also as someone who, as you said at the beginning, has lived in Qatar all of their life, what do you think will be the economic and the sort of strategic legacy of the World Cup? How is it going to change? You know, if we're sitting here on the 2nd of January next year, what's going to be different? And what does that mean for deployment of capital? Where should people be putting their money? And I know you're going to say real estate, but beyond real estate, obviously real estate first, buy your house, but then where do you put your capital going forward? So 2 questions: legacy, and what should one invest in the next year or 2 in Qatar?
I believe because Qatar has taken a very, very, very clear approach, as I mentioned, since before the World Cup. The World Cup was technically the groundwork, or allowed us to set our KPIs to finish on time and to even finish before the 2030. What I personally see, being, you know, living, being born and raised here, I see that Qatar has spent, or is really focused a lot on human development. And this is something I really respect about the vision of the government. So here, when we're talking about the establishment or the legacy it wants to be, we can look at the facts or what it has done in the past 12 years. We currently, as Leonie said, and Akbar, we have the best airport in the world. We have the best airlines in the world. We have one of the best education sectors in the region, and I would say world class. And that has been proven during the COVID times. You know, we have never felt that we are in danger. No matter what happened, the elderly people are always safe. We never run out of anything. We never felt that we were running out of any sort of medical supplies or ambulances or any. We've never felt that, never, even during the peak. We have one of the strongest education systems in the region itself. So in terms of what we're aiming for, I believe, it's always to provide the highest quality of living to the locals, residents, citizens, whoever's coming to Qatar is always having the highest source, highest quality of life. And we see this, people who usually come here for 3 and 4 years end up staying here for the 20-25 years. And obviously that gives Qatar, by hosting the World Cup, gives you the stand to be known or recognized globally. It gives you the soft power with all other countries. And I believe the end game, or what I would believe the legacy which it will leave behind after the World Cup, is to become the epicenter of the tourism and the business hub. Because right now we're still in the infrastructure, we're just getting ready to represent Qatar to the world. And now and FIFA is going to be the best way to showcase this to the world. And once we do that, I believe this will definitely attract a lot of people, which will get people's interest. Let's see what Qatar has, what it has to offer. And this is what we're being ready. So for example, we've participated in hospitality events, not real estate. So we were in Singapore 2 weeks ago. And in Singapore, we sat with the, all the top hospitality brands. We sat with all the travel agencies. And you can see that all these tours are coming together, whether it's an investment tour, whether it's a leisure tour, so everything is coming into play in that sense. In terms of investment, the reason I will say investing in Qatar, irrespective whether you're buying a home, starting up a business, this is definitely one of the safest places in the world. And we see this during the political blockade that Qatar went through. I understand, again, Leonie and Akbar can feel free to comment more on how the value of money tried to go down or not. So we've seen that the government has put down billions of money to ensure that the currency is safe, the people's investments locally are safe. So me, as a foreigner living here, I personally own a property on the island. I felt completely safe. The the evaluation of the property didn't go down as people would expect it to do so. So being a rich country with a very strong economy, with a very young population, that really gives you the safety, and based on how it's going, it really gives you the safety that you are in really good hands spending your money in a place like Qatar, being a first world country at this point, especially in that region.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of points in there. Akbar, I want to come back to you before I come to you again. The only same sort of question. What do you think is the legacy? What do you think are the areas, the non-energy areas that are going to be good opportunities in the next couple of years? And then, if you feel very brave, you might want to, because we've got a little bit pressed for time, bring in the impact of the North Fields expansion. But we will definitely come to that if you're not brave enough to go for that now.
So the most tangible legacy is the infrastructure. Leonie's mentioned lots of different types of transport infrastructure. In addition, there is infrastructure from power generation, sewage, desalination, a number of different areas of infrastructure, also telecom infrastructure, the 5G rollout, etc. So the physical legacy will be the infrastructure. Also, the infrastructure includes a lot of real estate, a lot of hotels, and that part of the legacy is the hope, I guess, that the government has as part of the legacy, is that there's a step change in the amount of tourism that Qatar sees and the number of tourists that Qatar gets. Prior to the blockade, there were about 3 million visitors a year coming to Qatar. I guess the government clearly and the country is now geared up for more than 3 million a year, given the number of hotel rooms that is, given the increase in the number of hotel rooms over the last 2 or 3 years. So that would be the area where I think from an investment point of view, there's already been a huge amount of investment, not just in hotels, but from water parks, world-class restaurants, theme parks, leisure facilities, just an explosion of basically things to do, the number of museums in the country, etc. So I think from an investment theme is if you believe that there will be a step change in the number of tourists, so in something to do with hospitality. I guess the other areas will be when with the extra, with the spotlight on Qatar, how well does the government translate that attention into helping bringing other types of businesses to the country? So clearly we have a services hub 40 minutes away from us. The regional services hub is Dubai. We have another we have the economic giant of the region south of us, which is Saudi Arabia. So it's not like there is a shortage of competition. Qatar offers a number of world-class, has a world-class offering, but it isn't the only one. So I guess the question is, there is the financial means to be able to push the diversification of the non-oil economy through various ways. And so a key test really is we should be doing the same discussion maybe in 2024 or 2025 to see how well at least the legacy was managed for the first several years. But the biggest legacy, in my view, is the intangible, which is the confidence that the people and the government will have got from actually bidding for the event, winning the bid, going through the process of building the infrastructure for the event, hosting it, and let's hope it's successful. And hosting an event of this scale, the amount of confidence that it would give you allows you to then do far bigger and far better things. So I think for the people of the country, that probably is the biggest legacy, will be the confidence that they get. And that confidence is being translated already in terms of growth, as you mentioned, into the plan which started 3 or 4 years ago, which was to expand the gas infrastructure. I mentioned Qatar is the largest exporter of LNG in the world. They produce 77 million tons of LNG, and that level was reached in 2010. The next step is a 2-stage expansion process. which will lead to, by 2027, 2028, increasing the current production by about 2/3, so to 126 million tons a year. Now, this was done not obviously with the expectation of an increase in demand from Europe, but really for the expectation to cater to the growing needs of China, of India, of Pakistan, Japan, Korea, etc., which are already the largest consumers. But the global transition towards a green economy gas is seen as a transition fuel. So there was already very significant demand which Qatar was seeking to cater to with the gas expansion. Suddenly, there is a big new customer in Europe, and there are a number of discussions that European utilities are having with Qatar to try and get longer-term LNG contracts. But the interesting thing is this, I would say as a last point, is the majority of the infrastructure that Qatar had to do over the next decade from an infrastructure point of view is done. The remaining infrastructure spend is coming as the LNG, which in contrast is tiny in contrast to what's been done so far. And then the amount of income which will be received by the government, i.e. by increasing the production by 2/3, there'll be 30 to 40% increase in income for the government. But there's no real expenditure attached to that income. So the surpluses will be even greater, which leads us to a question which you'll get to a bit later is what are they going to
do with them?
What are they going to do with it? So I will leave it there and say that this is a country which already is rich and it'll get richer.
So, well, that's a very nice, succinct a way to end what you've just said. Leonie, I want to just, I think there's an interesting question from our friend Martin Nkube, who comes from South Africa. And that when I'm typing away, it's not because I'm emailing my mother, it's because I'm dealing with the questions. But he said, one of the legacies in Martin, I'm paraphrasing you, was that they built these stadiums, they built these capital intensive projects, and then they just never got used up. That was it was one shot. From what both Basil and Akbar have said, that would lead me to believe that's unlikely to happen. But first question to you in this piece is, do you think that the assets and infrastructure that has been built for the World Cup is going to be suitably utilized after the World Cup? And then perhaps you could touch on the point that Akbar raised about the sort of medium-term future as being, let me say, the macro picture being underpinned by the development of the North Field.
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. So just in relation to the stadia, for instance, there's been, and this again speaks to the quality of the execution. One Stadium 974 is built of 974 redundant shipping containers, which is fully demountable. So the idea is that will actually be moved elsewhere to a country that would like a stadium. When you think of it, that is actually quite remarkable foresight or lessons learned from other jurisdictions. Yeah. Maybe even from South Africa. If you take the Lusail Stadium, which is a massive area, that was actually designed to have, for instance, the seating removed again for resale or redistribution, shall we say, so that it can be used as a public space. So there's been foresight and forethought given to what to do with the infrastructure post the investment, and some of it has, potential altruistic use of it as well. In terms of whether the future is entirely contingent on the North Field expansion, I'd say what's important to consider is the legacy of the World Cup and actually the North Field expansion is not only hydrocarbons, and money. It's actually, if you look at the way that the North Field expansion is being developed, it's actually, there's a significant investment planned in methane carbon capture and storage, for instance. So it's actually about not only a transition energy, but also a transition energy that is as clean as it can be got. And there's significant investment in that front. I think another, a similar point is the Al Qatar solar plant, which is coming online now, and is online this year, which underwrites the idea of the World Cup being the first carbon neutral World Cup ever. And that's 800 megawatts of actually highly efficient solar, which can fuel 55,000 Qatari homes as well. So the point is that the legacy is not simply about the kind of concrete infrastructure. There's renewable benefits. There is a credentialing of Qatar and a recognition of Qatar by Qatar that carbon intensity matters and is going to matter to the planet, and there are a repositioning of the country and the infrastructure in that light, both through the World Cup and through the North Field expansion. I think there's one other intangible legacy of the World Cup beyond the confidence factor, which Akbar spoke about, and that, as I've said, gets to quality. So the quality of the execution is in general very high, but it's also that's a cross-sectoral effect. So, digitization has been driven up rapidly by COVID, but it's also been driven up rapidly by the need to have scalable solutions for the World Cup.
Yeah.
So I think as I said, the legacy of the World Cup and the North Field are both tangible and intangible, renewable, re-credentialing, and which are substantial credentials or substantiated credentials. Plus, as I said, this ongoing drive for quality of execution.
Thank you. That's a very interesting. I'm sort of thinking and talking at the same time, which is never a good thing. But I understand what you're saying, and I hadn't really ever thought of it as working together. So thank you for tying those two slightly disparate topics into one very coherent whole. Basil, I don't want to come to you. We've got about sort of seven or so minutes left. And a question that has been coming up in a variety of different ways in the question feed I have is, Qatar and I'm sure you've had this many times, Qatar as compared to its regional neighbors. And you mentioned Qatar developing as a business hub and as a hospitality and tourism and event destination. Now, the perception outside of Qatar is that, of course, that Dubai, is Qatar going to become another Dubai? For those of you from the region, I apologize for asking this question. Everybody knows that it isn't, but it is what people think. And then you've, of course, got Saudi, who after 50 years of being fast asleep, have now decided that they want to become a major tourist destination, are investing hundreds of billions in a variety of different projects designed to attract people to there. They want to make Riyadh a business hub. So, within an hour and a half's flight, you've got two other destinations that are nominally competitive with Qatar. So how is Qatar how is it different? How will it be different? Why would somebody come to live, work, invest in Doha rather than going to, actually, it's a stupid question. I can answer that question, going to Riyadh. But, how does it fit into the regional landscape is really what I'm saying.
It's actually a very good question, and I would love to clarify it from my personal point of view and then from my professional point of view.
Please.
So from a personal level, you've seen our colleagues here discuss, Qatar comes from again, it's one of the richest country per capita. It depends, a lot of its revenues from oil and gas and LNG, as our colleagues are mentioning. So having this kind of sort of economy, the real estate sector, it's very, very stable and controlled, and the fluctuation level is controlled, whether it's the plus or the minus, similar to neighboring countries, again, some of which depend on tourism, depend on people coming in, depend on foreign money flowing into the country, in order to, as an economy, to be provided at the highest level. So there you will see the fluctuation up and down in a much more massive way. You can see the drop going down very quickly, and then the drop goes up very quickly. The approach which I believe Qatar has taken is not into just the the entertainment side. We are huge on human development, on museums, as Akbar said. We're focused more on family-oriented businesses and activities to make sure that we provide, as I mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on the highest quality of living, safe society, good environment, ensuring that the culture is respected, everything else is respected. Now, we're talking about infrastructures, the airports. So, and to tie it up in a nutshell, it is really one of the how I would say, we have everything the neighboring countries offer in terms of the entertainment and the recreation side, but it's not necessarily some things we are just super out promoting it. So we'd like to promote more of things that do actually make sense for for people, especially with families in that nature. So this is where I believe Qatar stands. So we're not following the footsteps, if you will, of as the question was, whether it was Dubai and whatnot. The footsteps it's following is really on development, on infrastructure, on becoming a business hub, and especially on I would like to call it on humanity itself. Just really coming down and providing whoever comes to it a good quality of life without hindering the surrounding itself.
Yeah.
Tourism should be. I am hoping, or we are hoping to see tourism come up the chain. Becoming number 2 or number 3 on the agenda, being surviving solely on your local revenue or the money coming in. So we are expecting to see a lot of the FDIs coming in, again, through the government initiatives. They have initiated a real estate regulatory authority. So that's just being regulated now, just being introduced. We've seen a lot of the freehold initiatives, the free zones being created. So it is really becoming that sort of nature, allowing people to come in, and establish themselves in a very comfortable way.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that the sort of the answer to the question that I asked about why and it's just, if you go and visit Doha, you get off the plane, you go to Riyadh, Doha, and Dubai, and just spend 20 minutes in each place, and you go, oh, okay, I get it. They're fundamentally different places, just because they might appear to be similar from an external perspective doesn't actually make they're not the same. They all have their strengths, but they're not, it's not cookie cutter, type thing. I'm afraid we're very near the end. We've still got nearly 300 people, so I'm going to push us, unless I'm told by my Euromoney friends that I need to stop, I'm going to push us a little bit over the hour, because I want to get to not the final question, but the penultimate question, and start with Akbar, which is something that you alluded to. Qatar is already a very important global investor through not just QIA, but through other companies and family offices and individuals. There will continue to be a capital surplus, even with the developmental path that is laid out for the country. Qatar is still, and I hope it remains, it's going to be a relatively small country. So some of that capital, I would argue, a sizable part of the capital that is going to be generated is going to need to be deployed internationally. How do you see that happening? Where do you see the areas of emphasis? Is it real estate? Is it technology? Is it stakes in blue chip companies? Akbar, what's your view on how Qatar will be deploying its capital internationally in the next, say, 5 years or 10?
Interesting question. I don't work for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, but what I would say is that look, there was a huge emphasis early on and perhaps I can use this just to explain that Qatar became wealthy in the way that most people know it to be wealthy now, probably about 20 years ago. So yeah. Prior to that, it wasn't at all a wealthy country. It was a very modest, probably modest from an income perspective. So all of what you've seen around in terms of the growth and what Basil has grown up seeing has happened in a very, very short space of time. And those surpluses have had to be invested externally. London was a favorite destination for a lot of Qatari capital in the previous decade. What's been said publicly is that they want to rebalance their investment portfolio. There's much greater emphasis in the United States. There's a much greater emphasis on Asia and emerging markets. There's probably a very large emphasis on real estate earlier on. I think technology, as you mentioned, they've done their share of investments in listed companies. And I think all of this will increase. They also have big investments in the mining industry through listed companies and others. So I think as the sovereign wealth funds probably will reach steadily its assets towards $500 billion, which is inevitable as the surpluses start coming through, you will see that global diversification, I'm sure, continuing from a sectoral perspective. As you get larger and larger, you struggle to do very small investments. You have to do much bigger ticket items. Some of the regional sovereign wealth funds have moved towards more of a passive investment strategy and away from much more of an active investment strategy. So that's an option as well. But obviously, this question would be best answered by somebody who writes the checks and makes the decisions for the sovereign wealth fund. I'm just answering as somebody who.
I'm not asking you to tell me what the QIA is going to do, because I don't even think the QIA knows what the QIA is going to do, because it's a very difficult market to know what to invest. But yeah, I thank you for that rundown. I think I'm getting signals that we probably need to draw this to a close. Our numbers are beginning to fall. So I'm just going to jump to the most important question of them all, which is, and start with Basil, then go to Leonie, and then finish with you, Akbar. So Basil, who's going to win the World Cup? So Qatar is a winner because it's in Qatar, but you can also vote for Qatar as the football team, and this is recorded, so there will be a record.
I am definitely voting for the Qatar team. I'm very proud of what they have accomplished, because they are entering there as the Asian Cup, winners. So I'm really wishing them the best of luck. I'm actually wishing the best, all the best to all teams. But definitely Qatar is, for me, is the one I support.
Okay, well, bold. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Not impossible.
Nothing's impossible. Nothing is impossible.
Nothing is written. Leonie, you touched on this before. I mean, it's going to be heartbreaking for you when it's Australia versus Qatar in the final. Or would it be lovely? Will that be the best result of all?
That would be the best result, and I think I'd probably have to sit on the fence as to which I'd prefer to win.
Yeah. Okay. And here's a politician there. I think it's going to be Australia. I'm going to say that. But you'll celebrate whoever wins.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing it's an Aussie. Aussies, eh? Very patriotic, especially when it's cricket against the English. Sorry, Akbar. What's your view? Who do you think? Who would you like to win?
I hope we get to see great football. That would be helpful. But I'm gonna, since you asked for the country, I'm gonna go with France.
Right. Yeah. Well, could do. I don't think it's going to be us. We peaked too soon. But there we are. So I would love it to be England, but I fear that it's not going to be this year. But it's going to be great, and whilst I won't be there to watch it, I hope you all will, and I hope you will have a lovely time. I'd like to thank each of you very much for taking part. It's been a terrific thing. I'm genuinely amazed and thrilled that we had so many people. I mean, usually for one of these things we get 150, which is pretty good. We're now on 250. We peaked at over 320. That's a lot. So I think that shows how interesting Qatar is, how interesting you are as speakers, and my thanks to you for doing that, and also for putting up. We've had a number of technical issues this morning, which we don't usually have. They all seem to have come today, and you've been very calm and understanding with us as we've dealt with that. So my thanks to all of you. I look forward to seeing you in Doha, probably in the new year. I'd like to thank Commercial Bank for being our long-term partner and sponsor of this and other things. They're great people to work with. I commend it to you all who are watching that you should immediately go to commercialbank.com and open an account and put large amounts of money in there and do all sorts of other exciting things. Great team, great people, great partners for us. So genuinely, thank you for doing that. I want to thank you, the Euromoney team of Sarah, Victoria, Claude, and the others who've worked very hard on this. And the team at Commercial Bank, there's been a lot of stuff goes into this behind the scenes, and they've been working really hard for the last few weeks to get this together. We'd now leave you with a holding slide to say, something's coming up. The next Euromoney event that is coming up will be in Cairo on the 7th of December. It will be very interesting. I've seen the agenda. And we will be back in Doha, inshallah, in May 2023, when we will pick up, I'm sure, many of the themes we talked today. So it just goes to me to say thank you all again, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.